Imagine a monkey sitting in a cage that's just barely big enough for him to lay down. He doesn't know when the next time a human's going to come up and poke him with something that made him feel weird, or that goop that made his eye bleed. He sits there and agonizes over the next time that he will have this pain. While he sits there and stresses out, he rips out his own fur. Imagine that monkey being your pet. Would you allow someone to do that to your pet? So why is this happening to laboratory animals? According to the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA, more than 100 million animals suffer and die in the U.S. every year in cruel chemical, drug, food, and cosmetic, along with medical training exercises and curiosity-driven medical experiments at universities. Exact numbers aren't available because mice, rats, birds, and cold-blooded animals, who make up more than 99% of laboratory animals, are not covered under the Animal Welfare Act and therefore go unaccounted for. The problem here is that laboratory companies aren't regulated or have little regulations, and so they are able to use whatever amount and do whatever they want with these animals with no regulations. The solution for this we will cover today, and that solution is the 3 R's. The 3 R's stand for replacement, refinement, and reduction. According to the Canadian Council on Animal Care, the 3 R's were created in 1959 by 2 gentlemen named W.M.S. Russell and R.L. Birch. Even though these were created then, they were just suggestions and were not created as laws. My solution would be to create these as federal laws, so that everyone within the United States would be required to follow these rules in order to be a research laboratory. Replacement means that you replace regular animals with computer models or use their DNA to test new products and medicines, so that animals don't have to be used. Replacement is separated into 2 different categories: full replacement and partial replacement. Full replacement is replacing all animals with computer models or the DNA. Partial replacement includes human volunteers, tissue cells, mathematical and computer models, and established cell lines. Partial replacement also includes the use of some animals, but based on current scientific thinking, they are not considered capable of experiencing suffering. Partial replacement also includes the use of primary cells and tissues taken from animals killed solely for this purpose. This would allow for researchers to get the evidence that they need on their experiments, with still not causing any harm to the animals, which is the whole goal of this solution. Reduction means that we use the smallest amount of animals possible. Reduction is a key part in this process because laboratories have no constrictions on the amount of animals that they use for their research. So to say if they were doing an experiment, they only needed 6 rats to do this experiment, but they wanted to make sure that they had enough of the right evidence, they could just use 50 and just kill each one of them off just to see at different parts of the stage how they were doing, just to see. There's no regulations on how many they can use. So reduction includes methods that allow the information gathered per animal in an experiment to be minimized in order to reduce the number of additional animals. Examples of this include some imaging modalities which allow longitude measurements in the same animals to be taken rather than culling cohorts of animals at specific times. This means that instead of culling a mouse to get his blood sample and test his blood to see where his certain liver and kidney levels are, they have new technology that allows them to pull the blood on a live animal and test it then, instead of the animal having to be post-mortem and then having to kill that animal just to test its blood for one little drop of blood that it needed, instead of living out its full life. Now, this isn't the most ideal part to be the solution, but it's definitely a giant step in the right direction, where if this was the rule, like this was the law for a little bit, then we could kind of pursue it farther. The final R stands for refinement, which refers to methods that minimize pain, suffering, distress, or lasting harm that may be experienced by research animals. and which improve their welfare. Refinement also applies to all aspects of animal use, from their housing and husbandry to the scientific procedures performed on them. Examples of refinement include ensuring that the animals are provided housing that allows expression of species-specific behavior, using appropriate anesthesia and analgesia to minimize pain, and training animals to cooperate with procedures to minimize stress. That is a big part in zoos, and even though with the zoos, they are very big on enrichment and making sure that these animals are living in habitats that are most best for them, this needs to be happening in research facilities too. So if we are using a monkey, there's plenty of trees and other people or the monkeys for him to mingle with because they are so social, and that would allow for fruits and veggies for him to eat, which makes that enrichment better, which makes his overall life better. So most people, when they think about animal testing, only think about animals being poked and prodded, but they don't think about the husbandry or how these animals live. Most of the time, the animals in research facilities are kept in a cage that is just barely big enough for them, and they are fed the minimum amount of food and water that's required because their overall goal is to find the answer to their experiment, but at the cheapest way possible. So they barely feed them enough so that they survive, but it's still leading to research issues because these animals are at the edge of starvation, and so if that medicine just messes with them just a little bit, it'll just automatically kill them off. So that is the big problem, and with refinement and just finding these enrichment toys, even though they still are being used, their lives are a lot better, and then being used, they still can live a happy life. So in conclusion, using reduction, replacement, and refinement will solve the problem of torturing and suffering of animals. This is not just a battle in the government, but this is a battle for you too. Stand up and be a voice to those who do not have one. I have attached a PowerPoint that shows some pictures on refinement, reduction, and replacement, and also what these animals go through while staying in there. And don't forget, be a voice for those who don't have one. We can fix this issue.